Tonight on 30 Minutes we have a human interest story on how alcoholism has affected the lives of not only an ex-alcoholic but their friends and family. Alcoholism is an extremely prevalent issue in Australia which not only impacts those who are directly involved in the lifestyle but the friends, family and community members of the individual as well.
I've got to go home and study.
Do it again!
Assignment on Sunday.
Here you go.
Hey everyone, Potaki. Mark, what does Potaki mean? Together.
Oh!
Wait, can you buy those a little longer for my...
Most people understand the feeling of wanting a drink after a long day, but not everyone knows how it feels to have a substance take over your every being. When this happens, it's referred to as substance abuse. The World Health Organization states that substance abuse is the harmful or hazardous use of psychoactive substances, including alcohol and illicit drugs. Psychoactive substance use can lead to dependence syndrome, a cluster of behavioural, cognitive and psychological phenomena that develop after repeated substance use and that typically include a strong desire to take a drug. Difficulties in controlling its use, persisting in its use despite harmful consequences, a higher priority given to the drug than to any other activities and obligations, increased tolerance and sometimes physical withdrawal state. Tonight we'll be exploring the epidemic through a few different individuals' experiences as well as expert opinions to fully grasp the issues of substance abuse.
Hi, my name is Aaron Catrick, and as an expert in alcohol abuse, I'll be talking about the interventions needed to address this issue and also the stigma behind this issue. Current Australian government interventions for alcohol addiction revolve around targeting individual drinking behaviour and treating the illness once it has occurred. One of the most effective current strategies is law enforcement relating to irresponsible alcohol use. These interventions can be somewhat effective but do not have any focus on preventative methods and do not address the root of the problem. Now, in order to begin addressing the problem holistically, the government must start to look at closing the socio-economic gap and individual opportunity discrepancy within the country. This is because factors like level of education, job status and income can play a big role in individual alcohol consumption. Furthermore, local action community-based programs to minimise alcohol-related harm should be put into place as a preventative measure.
Substance abuse in Australia has been a problem that spans decades and depending on the substance. The length of time it has been a problem is quite different. For example, prescription drugs abuse in Australia is a relatively recent problem, having only begun in 1990s. This reflected in the number of injectable drugs used. Before 2009, heroin was the most injected drugs of abuse, but it has since been overtaken by opiate, which is crushed and then injected. Other substances, such as alcohol, has been a public health problem in Australia for longer and has been more regular in the past decade. According to a recent study, alcohol-related hospitals have not changed much in Australia from 2006 to 2015 for males. This is around 4% and for females just over 2%. However, the age at which young adults have first tried alcohol has increased from over 14 to 1998 to about 16 in 2016. This tells us what while substance abuse is an age-old problem, we can still do quite a bit to change it.
I had my first drink when I was 16. All of my friends were drinking before me, and I definitely felt that pressure to drink so I would fit in. After that, I would drink almost every weekend, just to parties and stuff. I could never have one drink though. I always drank to get really drunk. I never used to see that as a problem, but looking back now, I really wish that I got help then. As I grew older, I stopped drinking socially and started drinking more as a coping mechanism. I had a lot of different stresses in life with family and work, and I just really drank to numb those stresses. When I was growing up, my dad was a heavy drinker, having a few beers every night after a stressful day at work, and that really influenced me to believe that drinking as a coping mechanism was okay.
In today's society, we see a number of causes for alcoholism. Factors including psychological conditions, personality factors, familial factors, and social cultural factors and trauma. Today, we see family as one of the most common causes of alcoholism.
So why would family cause someone to be an alcoholic? Can you just explain a bit more about that?
Excluding genetics, an individual's family life plays a significant role in the likelihood that they'll develop alcoholism. People who grow up in a family where heavy drinking is practiced or even encouraged and are more likely to develop alcoholism. In these families, heavy drinking is normalized and glamorized, making it socially acceptable, expected, and potentially desirable.
Hi.
Hi Ben, how are you?
Nice to meet you. Yes, good.
I'm Juliet, and today I'm going to be interviewing you on the topic of alcohol use in Australia. So I hear that it's a fairly serious issue. Can you tell me a little bit more about it in Australia?
Yeah, of course. So in our research into the culture of alcohol consumption, in Australia, it's shown that in every 90 minutes, there is an Australian citizen that has unfortunately passed away, that has unfortunately died, and obviously it's a result of alcohol.
That sounds really serious. Can you tell me a little bit about the different parts of Australia and if that differs around the states and territories?
Yeah, of course. So when we were looking at comparing other states and territories, it's shown in this graph here that we see on the bottom of this section of the graph that 17% of the population is consumed by alcohol, which means it's at a pretty high risky rate, high risk level. While most states and territories are around the 14 and 19% mark, again as shown up here, the Northern Territory is the outlier with it clearly shows that 27.5% is of the territory population is drinking, so it means it's at another risky level.
Those are some pretty alarming statistics. Do you know anything about, does your research cover anything about the injury or any repercussions related to the alcohol consumption in Australia?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we have a look into our next table, which will come up here it is, it describes the risks of injuries on a single occasion of drinking. Again, it's all up here. We also see again in the Northern Territory leading the way, which is really, it's not great. Yeah, it's not great at all. With more than half of the between 18 and 24 years of age, those people are going to be at a high risk of getting injured from drinking alcohol. At least once a month, due to the amount of alcohol they will consume at that time, which again we are looking to unfortunately hopefully fix.
The Northern Territory seems to be
leading the way.
Yes. So I know that the Northern Territory is mostly rural and regional area. So does that mean that there's a difference between regional, rural, and metropolitan alcohol consumption?
Yeah. So if we compare the other regions, the other areas, and major cities in particular, there is also an evident rise of consumption of alcohol. Again, according to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, adults living in outer regions and remote areas were 1.4 times as likely to concede alcohol consumptions guidelines as those living in major cities. So major cities, they are not as likely to. Men living in rural communities consume around 5% more alcohol in comparison to men living in city areas, so built up city areas. Again, now we're looking at teenagers, so whereas teenagers living in rural areas have a higher chance of consuming alcohol when comparing to the teenagers that live again in cities. So you can see there's a little bit of a pattern here, there's a little bit of a lot of uncertainty in for the rural areas, which again we will look to cover. These statistics that we're outlining here, the concern for Australians living in rural areas and remote areas, particularly men and youths due to their age and location, because of their sociological status, we're looking to help them in the future so that they don't consume too much alcohol.
Just look into the social constructs around health. Look into the consumption of alcohol. In almost every society around the world, it is internationally accepted and somewhat a praised construct that has developed over many years. It has greatly developed in very different ways, and weirdly enough, is one of the very few foods that we have that has, well, a determinator, if you will, of social class. If you look into the early days of history, you see that the higher social class, so like, you know, the lords, the queens, the kings, the ones of royal blood, really, they tend to enjoy champagne and higher class beverages like that, while the ones of the lower class, you know, hover more around the whiskey and the rum, you know, when you think of sailors and things like that. However, you had all the social classes drinking together on social gatherings, and it became the norm, and alcohol was like the guest of honor, if you will. This dates back to the earliest records of human history, so it's nothing new. It's just that the type of alcohol that was consumed was broken into sort of a hierarchy. As well as, you know, in gatherings you'd also have little children, you know, minors, around these gatherings, you know. People understand how alcohol works. They see its effects. It becomes very intriguing to these young children around these gatherings, and they're exposed to it at very early stages in their life. And it becomes a sort of fascination around how a simple liquid could drastically change a person's personality completely. I mean, you might have a more introverted personality, for example, and this completely transforms their character and their social behavior into a more of a fun type of person. It creates this special potion-like fantasy in their young minds. So when kids are looking at that, it's intriguing to them. However, alcohol also has side effects. You know, they could also be exposed to the darker side of alcohol. It is known that there is a darker side that can be quite damaging, you know, high risk, and if you drink too much, it's, you know, potentially fatal. However, in most societies, it's almost like the benefits outweigh the risks here. Even when the US tried banning alcohol completely in 1925, you saw mass prosecution, and many people resorted to brewing their alcohols in their homes and backyards, which led to more dangerous outcomes and diseases and things like that. But it was specifically with moonshine. That forced the government to retract the ban. And I guess alcohol allows people to sort of flow in social environments. Because of the nature of alcohol, when it alters the neurotransmitters of the brain, it allows certain hidden traits of people's personalities to surface. I guess it has this ability to relax people, you know, to make them feel at ease, and they just get along in social environments. Human beings are very social creatures after all, so I guess it helps with that. But we need to know and learn when it's gone too far.
Can you tell me how Australia ranks to the rest of the world in terms of alcohol consumption?
Yeah, of course. So, as a global perspective, Australia sits in the top 10 in the world in terms of alcohol consumptions. We can say that's because of our culture. But in comparison to America, let's say, they sit well below us in the charts. So, when we're looking at a different country that has a lower consumption rate, but if we look at a country that has more alcohol consumption, say Luxembourg. Luxembourg, they sit at a higher, they sit well on top of the top 10 charts. America's alcohol rate is at 9.2% consumption rate. And while Luxembourg, they are at a high 11.9, we sit in between that. So when we look, what we've done through our research, we see with developing countries like Luxembourg, they have a higher rate due to lack of education, awareness with alcohol, the risks that can happen through alcohol, the health benefits that alcohol has on people. Whereas you look at in developed countries, say as America, like those we were talking before, their policies are all around health, awareness, and just general well-being for everyone who is consuming alcohol. So when we look at, from your question, comparison to the rest of the world, we are kind of looking at, well, what can we do better so that that rate goes down? We don't want to be in the top 10.
Definitely not.
Definitely not. So how do we solve that? Is it drinking habits? Because Australia has a high drinking culture, or do we look at education? So if we can get those policies intact and ready, then I think we'll be at a good steady state in terms of alcohol consumption.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the information you've shared today, Ben. It looks like the Australian government has a lot to consider with policy and interventions towards alcohol abuse.
No worries. Thank you.
What can you say about the latest data concerning alcohol consumption in Australia?
Well, to answer your question shortly, I would say that the findings are alarming. As we all know, bad habits start at a young age, and from the research, we know that 46% of teenagers under 16 have consumed alcohol over the past year, and only 32% haven't tried it yet. Also, 61% of Australians do not consider regular alcohol consumption as an issue, and therefore this high RAC acceptance is a potential risk to our society. Nowadays, alcohol addiction is one of the most prevalent and deliberating psychiatric disorders among the general population. It is a disorder that impacts the central nervous system of the brain and reaches out, affecting many other organs. The damage and risks, short and long term, that alcohol can cause cannot be underestimated. High alcohol consumption leads to many serious health issues like pancreatitis, heart diseases, liver diseases, breast cancer, oral cancer, stomach distress, just to name a few.
So, does the alcohol-related harm awareness increases or drops over the years?
Definitely increases, and the latest figures prove that Australians are generally more reasonable when it comes to drinking. Fewer people are drinking daily, fewer people are drinking weekly, and they tend to consume less alcohol if they decide to drink. However, in my opinion, we're still progressing too slow, and I find surprising that although people know much more about alcohol, they still are not keen to change their habits in any drastic way.
Now, regarding the stigma behind alcoholism, according to the World Health Organization, 76.3 million people worldwide suffer from alcohol use disorders, which is why alcohol dependence is seen as one of the most severe and most widespread mental disorders. Alarmingly, about 4% of all deaths and 5% of all disability-adjusted life years lost can be attributed to alcohol. The consequences of alcohol dependence are not only limited to physical health, as alcoholism has a profound negative effect on an individual's social behaviour, social interactions, and social environment. The stigma surrounding alcoholism is likely to aggravate these effects, as it may negatively impact the desire of an individual to obtain professional help. This is because people fear being labelled alcoholics, which subsequently leads to them experiencing discrimination and the loss of status. Social exclusion of those in need of social support may also arise, and this is due to the stigma surrounding alcoholism, and it may also produce structural discrimination against alcohol-dependent individuals, such as the coverage of addiction treatment by private or public health insurance. In closing, it is important that we address the stigma surrounding alcoholism, as it will help us to improve both the physical and social health of alcohol-dependent people.
There are various different methods that I could have implemented in my life to really combat my issues, to even prevent me from becoming dependent on alcohol. Removing myself from the environment, going to see a counsellor about my issues, finding a better and healthier coping mechanism even, rather than drinking, something like exercise. The first thing that I needed to do was accept that I had a problem, and that's what I eventually did. Now I'm 3 years sober and I'm doing everything that I can do to be a mentor for those who are struggling with the same issues as I did.
Tonight we took you into the world of an ex-alcoholic and what their daily struggle with substance abuse has done to them and their family members over many years. Since our interview with the ex-alcoholic, they have been 1 year sober and are trying to help others towards their own goal of living a sober life. We would like to thank the World Health Organization for providing information and sitting down to talk with us about this issue in depth. Remember, if you or someone you know is affected by alcohol, please don't hesitate to contact or look up helplines and other websites. Make a difference in someone's life, help them out. We hope you have been well informed by the show tonight. I'm Chris Baldwin, and from everyone at 30 Minutes, good night.